All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the art panel of the Student Game Developer Alliance's 2023 Summit. With me today are some talented artists that have taken time out of their busy schedules to answer some of your burning questions. So we already have some questions prepared, but towards the end, we'll be taking some from the audience in the Twitch chat. My name is Kelly Tu. I'm an artist and a student at IBC.
Oh, I'm Megna. I am an officer at SGDA. I'm the marketing lead, and I'm also a former graduate of Ringling College of Art and Design and incoming graduate student at Carnegie Mellon. And if the panelists want to introduce themselves.
Sure, I can start. Hello, everyone. My name is Scarlett. My pronouns are she, they. This is my 7th year in the video games industry. I started off as a graphic designer at Crytek, and I'm currently a senior UI artist at Ubisoft.
My name is Hanako, she, they. I am the lead artist on Among Us at Innersloth, and I've been there, I think I'm pushing 2 years. I don't remember anymore. Pandemic was a blur.
Yeah, I feel that.
All right, so let's get right into it. With our first question, how did you end up working in the game industry? Was it something you always wanted to pursue or something you stumbled into?
Shall I start?
Sure.
Whoever
Yep.
wants to.
Okay. So for me, I kind of I called it like I oopsied into the industry. So as I mentioned, my first job was a graphic designer at Crytek in Frankfurt, but I actually started my working life as a project manager because back then I needed the money. So it was kind of trying to look for something that would be able to pay the bills, but also give me time to pursue design. But of course, after that, I shifted towards graphic design, shifted back to graphic design, and was working in both in studio and freelance positions. And then one day, just randomly saw a job opening for a graphic designer position. And I decided to apply because why not? And that was kind of the decision that kickstarted like my entire path in the gaming industry. So, yeah.
Okay.
I also whoopsied my way into game dev. I actually spent 10 years pursuing a comics career. And so I spent a lot of time working in Artist Alley and traveling around while doing other very normal day jobs. Um, and then COVID hit. I quit my office job to try and do comics full time. I started picking up more merchandising work and ended up working alongside Innersloth to design a lot of merchandise, and then eventually got picked up by the company to work officially.
Okay, love that. Love all the merchandise you have on display in the background as well.
The beautiful children.
Yeah, very interesting where art can take you. There's many different paths. So second question here. How did you figure out what job position or type of art you wanted to pursue?
This one was quite actually, it was pretty straightforward for me, I guess. I studied graphic design and advertising, and even initially wanted to work in advertising. That didn't quite happen, as you probably see. So with the background in graphic design, it kind of just made sense to transition towards user interface art because the knowledge in design fundamentals is applicable for both fields. But like for the type of art, most of the time for me, I'm just happy to be surrounded by art and being able to draw and paint, etc. And I'm also quite interested in concept art. So in some ways, I don't always think that what I'm doing right now is like the final position for me in the industry because I always have that aim to want to work towards concept art. So I think like it's um, So from this perspective, is also important to realize that the field that you aim for at the beginning, it doesn't really like define you, because there's always room to explore the opportunities and to find the things that sparks the most interest in what you want to do. And in my case, it's both user interface and concept art, actually. So
Yeah, that's interesting. You use like your earlier jobs as like a stepping stone into the field you actually want to be in.
yeah, absolutely. It was definitely like, I think from each job, there was always something that I managed to take away from a learning experience, which without the previous positions, I don't think I would be kind of the person or the artist I am today. So it definitely created quite a lot of influence on me.
For myself, I think it doesn't help that I didn't go into games intending to do games from the start. But I always knew I wanted to move into the role of like an art director. I enjoy being able to push a vision and not necessarily drawing myself. I know for myself at least I have a lot of sometimes physical limitations where I deal with a lot of arm pain that I'm still working through. Um, but I enjoy being able to, I guess, direct that vision, help other people achieve that vision themselves. Um, and I just got very lucky that I was able to find that at Innersloth. I did do that with merchandising for a brief time, and then went back to being an more of a production artist for a while, but eventually keep finding myself back in this position.
Okay, so all you aspiring artists out there, you don't have to get right into your dream job right away. It's okay to just apply wherever you can, right? And just take those as stepping stones for your goals. Okay, question number 3. Does your approach to art change with the genre of game you work on?
I found that question really interesting, and I had a really long, hard think about it, whether or not it actually changes. But for me, I don't actually think so, because the approach, like the method itself, is always the same. It's just the genre of the art itself is different. Like the fundamentals are the same, no matter what genre. So whether or not you're working in a competitive esports element, we look for urgency or lighter interfaces, or in other projects, we look for elements that might be darker or horror with aesthetic references from like specific time periods. There's such a variety of art styles to do, but the method of creating it is always going to be the same, at least for me.
Yeah, I think I have a similar answer where a lot of it is I haven't had to necessarily like work in my own personal art style for a very long time, but the way I approach my work is looking at the style that I'm being asked to meet and then treating it almost like as like a game or a puzzle in and of itself, where it's just like, how do I achieve this in my own way while getting the result that I want? Or with a lot of like the design of cosmetics in Among Us, for example, like there's very specific rules that you wouldn't people don't seem really realize that are there, but then when you're asked to design a new item, there's a game that I have to play of like what details can I keep and like how do I do this while still being true to like what I think is a good vision for this item.
Yeah, definitely. There's a big difference between art you're doing for work and art you're doing for yourself. So you have like so many more factors to think about when you're doing art for work because you have like higher ups to please. So yeah, thank you for that. Question number 4. How does being a freelancer or self-employed artist differ from working in a studio?
Um, I can only speak of my experiences as a freelancer, which I worked only very briefly for before joining the games industry. Um, being a freelancer kind of meant like you are your own boss because you get to choose your own schedule, unless of course you are working contractually, in which case sometimes you do have to work the 9 to 5. But also another advantage of that is that you have the opportunity to work on a variety of projects. Like you get to choose essentially. So you get more exposure to perhaps like working with different people, you also learn different communication styles, and you learn to pick up quite a lot of different things on the way as well. But from that, of course, sometimes being a freelancer can be quite lonely because you don't get as much peer feedback. Let's say, for example, if you're working in a studio with somebody or a creative studio with somebody, you will have colleagues. But usually as a freelancer, it's less of a case. And particularly from that perspective, like it's hard for folks to develop like deeper connections. I think that would have otherwise been your colleagues. But yeah, I think those are kind of like my takeaways from working as a freelancer.
Again, pretty similar. I think the main thing is the biggest difference is you have a team that you get to work with, and you get to develop those long-term relationships within that team, not only like personally, but also like learning the processes that are necessary to keep a game moving forward and getting it out in theory on time. And having that opportunity to establish yourself in that space, I think is very nice compared to doing, freelance or self-employed. My time doing a lot of that was waking up at very strange hours, going to sleep at 5 a.m., wake up at like noon, optimistically. Versus now it's like, well, I wake up at a specific time and then I hop on and I check my messages and check in with the team and see what maybe the East Coast people left for me before I got in that morning and go from there. So it's definitely more long-term structure, which is very nice. And again, like those long-term relationships and bonding with your team, there's not really anything like it, I think.
I would agree. I absolutely love working with my team at the moment, and I think like particularly when COVID hit and everybody did that kind of shift of like working remotely, it was learning how to communicate with each other in a very different way. And I think through that we actually even learned how each other worked as well, and also how to communicate. And I think that really helped a lot in developing that closer bond. So I completely agree with you.
All right, that's very interesting. So basically, freelancing and like working on a team, it's like two very different styles. So, on to question 5. What kind of impact or goal do you try to reach with your art? This is a more personal question.
I really loved this question because for me, art has always been a part of me like my entire life, even when I was growing up and I was constantly being told that this wasn't going to be a sustainable career. I guess having Asian parents as well, there's like certain expectations in being pursuing to be a doctor or a lawyer or accountant, etc. But I kind of defied all of those odds and decided to work in games. But directly for this question, like there's 2 layers of this for me. So for my everyday job, for my art, I like to make sure like the work that I do reaches the players like in the best experience that they can, which in the case of user interface is to help guide them through the game without bothering them too much. So most of the time, if it's invisible in a way, then it works. And the plus side is that I also get to make things look pretty on top of that. So from that approach is a bit more, it provides more of a practical impact, I think, with my art on this side. But when it comes to creating my own art, which I do, for me, it's like a release. It's like an expression of thoughts. And I think combining that with growing up alongside diverse cultures as well, it gives me a lot of inspiration to create work that responds to that. And from that, I usually hope, at least I hope, to be able to share these experience with folks that are interested in looking at my art from that perspective.
I have the strong solidarity with the Asian parent expectations. Boy, I think definitely early on, I had a lot of people tell me that I should simply stop trying to make money with art and do something like IT instead, because maybe that would be a better use of my time. So I feel like a lot of my work is sort of like in defiance of that. Definitely like the work that I would do in the comic circuit was very much basically follow two rules of like, is it stupid? Is it fun? Because ultimately if people are like, if I can get people to laugh at my work, I've done my job. And that's followed me into my work on Among Us as well, where like a lot of the art within Among Us follows the two rules of like, is it stupid? Is it fun? Because that means the players are having fun too. And that's the core of my work, I think, is I want people to be happy when they look at it.
Love that.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to those Asian parents' expectations when it comes to being an artist. Oh, you're not going to make any money, but
Nope.
you guys are living proof. You can defy those expectations. You can follow your dreams. You can make people feel something through your art.
My parents are finally at peace with what I do after many,
That's
many
great.
years.
I love that.
Mine are slowly getting there, I think. Slowly but surely.
All right, on to question 6. Have you faced any challenges in the game industry due to your race or gender?
That's a very good question. Yes, in short. But I'm still here. Like, there are problems within the industry, but I think like weighing the issues that that some of us face, especially for marginalized groups as well, weighing that against other aspects, such as being able to work with a fantastic team and finding supportive communities and being able to find safe spaces for folks as well. I think that kind of trumps the challenges that we do face a lot, because I guess like gonna do a little plug, like my role as a Women in Games ambassador as well. Part of my role is to bring folks together and to highlight the importance of representation in the industry. And of course, with these challenges that we do face every day, the more important part is that the larger portion of the folks actually come together and say, hey, this is not right. And we are here to change the face of the industry. So long story short, I think, like, long answer short, even.
My answer is no, with the asterisk of I've spent very little time in the game space thus far. In other art spaces, it's definitely been a yes. And I think a lot of it is just archaic systems that haven't caught up yet. I have been very fortunate that the spaces I have been in like the last 3-4 years have been largely women in lead positions, people who go up to bat to defend their people from outside forces who would punch down on them. I've been very fortunate in that regard.
All right, yeah, I definitely agree with like to make things better, you gotta like stand up for yourself, be the change you want to see. So there's a Another question also tied into this one. Has the industry gotten better over time, over your many years of experience?
I would also say yes to this question. There's definitely been more focus in highlighting the importance of diversity and inclusion in the industry. Of course, I think in certain spaces we definitely still have some way to go, but I'm hopeful. So I would say yes, it's gotten better, but it could still be better.
I would say yes as well. I would looking at having been in several art industries, seeing games move forward at a better pace than others has been very hopeful, I think. And also seeing like especially like in the indie game space, more diverse voices putting out their work and having it very well received. Like I think of Venba or Spirit Swap and like how excited people are to see themselves reflected in those. Not only like and the on the surface like art wise, but also with the people behind it. I'm very optimistic for the future of games.
All right, we are on to question 7. What tools or experiences have you found beneficial to the type of art you do?
So for me, my usual tools are the Creative Suite, so like Photoshop, Illustrator, After Effects. For my own work, oh no, also have to add for work as well. I also use the software that's developed in a studio by Ubisoft. But when I do my own work, I also use quite a lot of 3D as well. So I use Blender. And I think like for the experiences is kind of maybe a little bit out there, but for me, usually going outdoor or nature, and it helps to like disconnect and get inspiration from different perspectives. That's how I find that to be a bit beneficial to the art that I make. Not necessarily like on any specific types of art, just I think for art in general, I think it's quite nice.
A big shout out to all the free software I picked up when I was a student. Because of being able to dabble in those tools early on helped get me a better like baseline for being flexible later on. I remember there's a copy of unnamed art software that was definitely pirated that didn't work half the time. And learning to adapt made me stronger somehow, whether I liked it or not. I think having to that self-employment life of doing art for conventions and meeting those deadlines of if I don't get this in before this time, like I'm not going to have this thing on the table, and learning sometimes to let go of the work that I'm doing where I'm like it's not perfect but it will get out the door help me to be less precious about the work that I do, where I'm not spending time doing iteration over iteration over iteration, where sometimes it's just like this will do and it gets the job done and I'm going to send it at the door now and close my eyes and not think about it anymore. Beyond that, I find looking not necessarily at other games because I had similar experience with comics where it's like if I wanted to get experience like inspiration for something else, like I didn't want to look at other comics because sometimes I get too wrapped up in like this person already did this so I definitely can't do this now. But different forms of media, so reading books or watching movies or going to a museum, having a different frame of reference outside of the space I was working in was very refreshing to kind of get that creative drive going again.
Agreed. Definitely doing different things besides doing art is like the gaining different perspectives. Like different perspectives definitely helps a lot, and I definitely relate to the shall I call it the artist's curse of being a perfectionist,
Yeah.
and finding it very difficult to sometimes take the step back and just say, let it go, it's okay. It's fine. You don't have to make it completely perfect. And yeah, I completely relate to that.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something a lot of artists struggle with, perfectionism. But you just gotta remember that you're not a god, so the work you put out, that's your work. Own it. And
Yeah.
for my student artists out there, there's a lot of free art programs you can get just by being a student. So it's important to take advantage of those. And Blender is free. So question number 8. How does working as an art lead or director differ from a non-leadership role?
I haven't personally been in a lead or a director role before, so I I'm not sure how much of an insight I can give here, but most of the time when working with different teams, it's important to find a person um, that trusts you and actually sees each team member's strengths and being able to draw out these strengths and also understand the fact that everybody has different strengths and how to utilize this. And I have to say, from what I've learned from my leads, I definitely understand it's important to have this as an aspect in a leadership role. Whereas from a non-leadership role, it's important to definitely take inspiration from others and communicate with all of your team members as well. Being able to always ask for feedback, etc., and also feeling comfortable to be able to do it. And always remember there are no stupid questions. Like just ask, because more like 10 times out of 10, usually it would mean that somebody else might also have the same query as well. It's important to ask questions. And I think like to find a good team to work, it no matter whether you are in a leadership role or not, being able to communicate, I think is very, very important.
The biggest lesson I learned from moving into the art lead position, and any of my team members who are watching this right now will be laughing at me as I say this, but learning that in fact I cannot draw all day and also be an art lead at the same time. Turns out that's a terrible idea. I think the way somebody put it was that you end up going from like the art as the example being 90% of your job and maybe 10% is other tasks in organization, to it being maybe 10% of what you do. Because a lot of my time is now occupied with making sure that everybody else can be drawing 90% of the time and making sure that they have the feedback that they need, that they're not waiting on anything from me, and they know what to do next, which has been hard to let go of for me, because it used to be my day was just I would wake up, I would check my messages, and then I would just start drawing, and then I would clock out. And now it's like I'm spending so much time in meetings and organizing everyone else's tasks so that they can clock in and start drawing and then clock out. But it is satisfying in its own way to know that everyone else is able to do that because of the work that I'm putting in as well.
All right, I'm going to skip over question 9 because I feel like we've already gone over that a little bit because we're coming up on time. So number 10, what advice do you have for art students looking to work in games?
To I would say to be realistic, and I'm going to try and expand as taking as little time as possible, because there's two sides of the games industry to acknowledge. So getting your first steps into the industry can be tough because it is competitive, and it's going to be competitive because you're going to compete with a lot of fellow game developers and students who hope to make that break into the industry. And in addition to the challenges that folks sometimes face within the industry, as we've talked about previously, it's important at this point to be kind and supportive of one another. So, because doing this means you'll work and build connections with fellow developers that are in the industry because they love what they do. And of course, to make great, fun, and silly games sometimes as well. And so I would say, like, be realistic, but also to celebrate each other's achievements, uplift each other, and every step that you take towards the role that you want to do in the games industry is always worth celebrating. So be realistic and celebrate, I think is the takeaway.
Yeah, I think with the realistic element, like the reality is, I'm in my dream job role right now, as far as I'm concerned. But it also took 10 years of kitchen work before I got to this point. The path to getting here was definitely going, not just going to conventions necessarily, but meeting other people in the space that you want to be in. Because networking matters. The reality with artists as well is that, like, artists want to help their friends. And that's how a lot of the art industry as a whole works. That said, I think it is very important, and I want to stress this, is to be sincere about not only who you are, but the connections that you're making. Because those are the ones that will care about you, the person, versus you, the asset, down the road. And surround yourself with those people that you actually care about and the people that you want to work with.
Agreed.
And even when things are not so great, you'll still have people looking out for you versus people who just saw you as another stepping stone. Nobody wants to be that stepping stone. Don't use people as stepping stones, because it will come back to bite you.
Agreed. That's what I love about the industry, is everybody supports each other and uplifts each other. And I think, yeah, I love the industry. It's everybody just communicates. Yeah. Agreed.
All right. So now I will be moving on to the audience questions. We have a lot of audience questions to go through. So the first one from Solid Parker. I'm curious how the creative vision is communicated between the project manager and the concept artist. From your point of view, what responsibilities would you like the lead designer to assume when formulating an art style? It's a very complicated question.
At least for Among Us, we have one art style that we match. But that said, I love a whiteboard personally. When we're working on a project that involves a bigger vision, a lot of it is compiling references of, like, here's sort of the ideas that we're thinking of. We're not necessarily committing to them. But we're just gonna throw it out there. We're just gonna see how we feel, and we start seeing, like, start bouncing ideas back and forth. I think keeping that early stage very organic is very important, because sometimes something just comes out of left field. You're just like, this has nothing to do with what we were doing, unless, what if we did this actually? Because I think it's more fun that way too. But sometimes the best ideas are the ones you weren't expecting or weren't, like, attempting to approach from the front.
I would agree with what Hanako was saying. So at the moment, I work on a project called Rainbow Six Siege, and we also do have a set style. But of course, when it comes to working on new features that we want to add, or new weapon skins or something, for example, then we would also be looking for references, and also in general to try and be as open during the research process, like the research part, as possible. Because as Hanak was saying, like, to be a bit more organic in this research, sometimes you never know what inspiration you might find from, like, possibly the most random thing that you can find. So being open to that actually helps a lot.
Okay, another audience question from Peony, or Nicolette, one of our SGDA mods. What are some important things for an artist to put on their website? And what should you put on your resume?
Your recent projects, your most recent projects. And if you're, of course, if you're a student, then any projects that you've been working on, whether whether during your studies or even projects that you make during game jams. This is something that you would definitely be able to show. For the resume, of course, your most relevant experience. And what else? And I think any other achievements that you might think that's relevant in the games industry. So, for example, if you participate in game jams or if you are part of any groups that also highlight diversity and inclusion, I think that would also be quite important because at least from my perspective, from as a Women in Games ambassador, it's important to find that there are people that are passionate about wanting to increase the representation in gaming, at least from my side. But I hope the recruiters also will see this from this point of view. So.
Yeah, I think definitely showing the things that you've not only been working on but that you're passionate about is very important. Strictly from a portfolio point of view, have categories for the job that you're applying for, whichever category of work is most relevant, have that be the splash page that they land on first. As an example, like I had my portfolios like comics, design, merchandise for jobs where I was like, I'm applying for like merchandise jobs right now. That merchandise category becomes the front page of what I'm working on. Or it might be like game projects that I've worked on. That's going to be the front page of my portfolio site. Have your email available. I feel like with the way social media is shifting, that gets a little rougher. But especially like on Twitter, in theory, just having your email address available along with the website link available from the start is good because they shouldn't be sliding into your DMs. Because nobody wants to be there. That's probably the best advice that I have off the top of my head.
Yeah, definitely have your email address there. So it makes it easy to actually contact you. Also, I want to actually add on to the portfolio part as well. Try and keep the number of projects to a lower number as opposed to showing as many pieces as possible, because it's often better to show projects that you've worked on a bit more substantially to be able to show your way of thinking. More important, that's more important than showing 10 pieces of one-off art pieces that perhaps doesn't have much of a storyline, or is just something that you decide to do as a one-off painting, for example. So definitely limit the number of projects that you show, but show your thinking and show your process in how you actually put this project together.
Yeah, like possibly even like showing like work in progress stages of a single project if it's something that you feel very strongly about, like being able to see how you approach the work is very valuable as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, next question is from Archangel Dawn. What are some of your favorite pieces of media from a visual perspective? What are you a big fan of?
I would have to say the latest Spider-Verse movies. Like the art style, I am just absolutely in love with. The way that the style is drawn and the way that it's animated as well, everything just brings together such a beautiful storyline with a beautiful universe, and it completely draws you in. I think that would be like the biggest, the most recent example, I think, from my perspective, as far as I can think of at the moment.
I think the two things that come to mind immediately, one would be I just finished reading It's Lonely at the Center of the Earth by, I think it's Zoe Thorogood. I think that's what it was. It's an autobio of an artist in lockdown trying to finish a comic. but the range of how she chooses to express what she's going through, switching through mediums and communication. She has multiple portraits of herself. It's so good. It's so good. I keep thinking about it. But it probably would be that, and also Land of Lustrous is a manga that some people probably know about, but like the way, not necessarily the comic itself, but like there's an art book that the artist put out of concept art that she did, and the use of negative space in there is, it's so good. It's so dramatic for what it is.
Another question from Peony. What are your views on how AI will affect art careers in the near future? Very controversial question here.
Ooh, that is a very controversial question, but a good one. I think, to be honest, I think the art industry is a bit divided on the progress of AI at the moment. Although personally, I feel at the end of the day, AI itself is similar to all the software and experiences that we've learned whilst we've been going through the games industry through our jobs. At the end of the day, it is a tool to help us, because AI in itself, it uses algorithms to learn from what already exists. And without, I think without human creativity and human innovation, the AI's learning is only going to reach to a certain level. So, but at the same time, I'm also very curious about how it's going to affect artists' work. Should one chooses to use AI to guide their art, but I would say at the moment I'm just a bit more curious about the direction of how it's going to go. So yeah, I'd rather keep it a bit open here.
Yeah, it's definitely, AI is definitely a tool, and what that tool does depends on the intention of the person, whether it be someone like with the recent Spider-Verse, they used AI to do a lot of the tween work, the really like nitty-gritty like animation work that nobody wants to do because it's menial and frustrating, but they input their own information into a system that would do that for them. There's a difference between that and people who want to take a shortcut to being an artist, I guess, and say like, look at this anime waifu I made. And it's like, I think AI doesn't have intention and it doesn't have vision. And without that, it's not good. Is probably my hot take on it. Because it can generate stuff and it can be, in theory, technically good, but does it have a point? Does it know what it wants to do? Like, you look at art in games, like, it is art in a game, but it also has a point and it has a design and an intention, and like every piece of art down to, a single UI button has a thought behind it, and like how it fits in with everything else. And AI doesn't know how to do that. AI is just guessing at what you want. But it's just a guess. And maybe it'll get lucky once in a while, but it's still so much work to get to that point. And I don't think you can program intention into an AI. Although I think if they do eventually program intention into AI at that point, where you've got probably a robot uprising at that point, and we have bigger problems. So,
yeah, glad to hear my job won't be replaced by AI.
no.
Next question is from the V-Tran. What are the red flags you'd look out for when applying for an art position at a studio?
That's a very good question. I think it's important to actually, one of the questions I would ask when, particularly when you're in an interview, perhaps ask certain questions such as what's the turnover rate? It's a bit more specific, but to ask like what's the turnover rate within the art team, for example, and if HR decides to tell you that it was, and I guess like if the turnover rate is quite high, then that's definitely a red flag to look out for. Because why would there be so many artists leaving or changing teams or something? There must be some sort of thing to look out for. And that's a really good question. I can't think of another one right now. Perhaps Hanako, you might have something right now.
Yeah,
while
I mean,
try
I
and
would
think.
say point blank, just like asking like what do you value? Like what's important to you, the studio? Do you care about like what does your studio do about diversity? I think the thing with interviews, I think, is easy to forget, especially when you're younger, is that they are interviewing you to see if you are a good fit for them, but it is also a two-way situation where you are also interviewing them to find out if they are a good fit for you. Because you can just be like, "Nah, this sucks. I'm out." Um, and also like even just looking at like, okay, so like here's your company page, like who's working for you? Um, that can say a lot. Looking at the games that they're putting out, like what are the things in your game that are being shown as like being valued? Do your games reflect diversity? Do they say like have some very sketchy, questionable messages? Just as much as they're judging your work and your portfolios, you are also judging theirs.
Yep, I definitely agree with that. Interviews are always a two-way situation. Never ever think of it as only a one-way thing. It's always two ways because you can also decide at the end of the day whether or not you want to take this position, depending on the outcome on the conversation that you have had with the recruiter during the interview. You always have that choice. Then, even if certain times if HR might sound a little bit pushy and being like, "Oh, I need you to make this decision today, whether or not you want to take this position," you still have that choice to make because you're going to be the one that's going to be working in the studio and you're going to be creating work with them. So you got to have a good vibe in order to feel good about working there. So don't feel pressured.
Yeah, I think I would add on to that, like you, the artist, like as much as so many industries want to devalue artists, I think there's a need for artists to recognize and utilize that you are the product. Without art, they don't have anything to sell. They need you, not the other way around.
All right, let's try to get to these last two questions. From Ethan, would you say you miss getting to do more of the hands-on art stuff in a lead position? I guess this one's more aimed at Hanako.
Yeah, it's kind of a bummer in that like there's definitely stuff where I'm just like, I really want to do this. I could just do this, but I don't have the time. And then I start asking around like, who else would like to do this? Or like looking at like, okay, like I know you would be a good fit to do this. Like I will entrust my vision to you, and just like it's like that image of Link in Wind Waker where he's got the arms up. He's just like let it has like the command let go. That's me every day. And I think it's one of those things where it's like in theory I could do more, but I would also be doing a lot of damage to my mental and physical self, and I don't want to do that actually. Because that's how you get burnt out. And it's more important to be there for your team than to try and be noble or let your ego lead to be like, oh well, like I know I can do this better, so I should just do it myself. It's like sometimes you have to be able to trust your team. And let go of that part of your brain that says like I want to be the star.
All right, very last question before we wrap up here. From Megna, how did your portfolios develop from when you first started as an artist till this point in your careers?
The first painting I ever made, it had absolutely no perspective whatsoever. And it's possibly one of the most horrible paintings I've ever done in my life. But the thinking behind it was still there. But the thing is, I think if I never had that courage to actually create that painting and be like, oh my goodness, this is like possibly the worst thing I've ever done. I don't think it would have given me that motivation to be like, okay, I think I need to get a bit better. So I would say like it's kind of pushed my determination to be a better artist like every single day. And I also try and find like inspiration all the time from everywhere to see how I can try and improve my art. So yeah, if it wasn't for that horrible painting, I don't think I'd be here. So make lots of ugly paintings, I think. There's always that saying of like to be good, you have to practice for 10,000 hours, I think, or something of that sort. I don't remember who exactly said it. And I'm not even halfway through that 10,000 hours, but you still get there. And it's more important these days, like to also have fun and like enjoy yourself as well. So
Yeah, I think about like Hokusai, who is a famous like Japanese printmaker who like he died right before he turned 100, but he's just like, no, I'm almost a good artist. Just like I want to get to 100. It's like the idea that like someone who's like technically a master of his work still being like, I'm not there yet. I'm not perfect yet. Definitely that strive to keep growing because there's always room to improve, and I think being able to look at your work and being like, here's some things that I could fix, and not necessarily dwelling on it, but doing it better the next time around. As long as you can do it a little better the next time, it's fine. I think that said, being more sincere in my work is my biggest takeaway over the years. I think early on I did a lot of like fan art because I was like trying to hustle and like I wanted to like, I was like, I want people to like me. And realizing that people look for sincerity in your work. And I say that, yeah, I keep bringing that up as a theme, but being honest about who you are, what you care about, people will see that, people will recognize that. And having work that reflects that, I think, is important.
All right, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to come and answer our questions. Magna, did you have anything else you wanted to add, or?
Yeah, pretty much the same thing. Thank you so much for coming by. It was really interesting hearing your perspectives. And also, since you both had very unique paths into the industry as well, I think that was really informative for these students here on the stream. I guess if Jason, you want to say anything?
I'm on
too much.
LinkedIn. Kelly Tew.
Oh yeah, I'm also on LinkedIn as well. Scarlet Fu. I think should be quite easy to find.
I'm not on LinkedIn actually. I should probably do that one day. But I am on Twitter at This Is Hanako.
I am also on LinkedIn as Megna Nil. I'm also on Twitter. I go by Megna Carter Art. And yeah. Thank you guys for coming by for the art panel. Next up is Showcase C, which features, I believe, Refresh and LeBlanc. So yeah, thank you so much for coming by.
Thank
That's great.
you.
Thanks for having
Thank you,
us.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.